Why my brain won't let go of them involves understanding specific neurological attachment mechanisms that create persistent emotional bonding even when relationships end or become unhealthy. Your brain possesses sophisticated systems designed for deep human connection that don't simply disengage when circumstances change, requiring systematic understanding of attachment neuroscience rather than self-criticism about why letting go feels impossible. These brain mechanisms evolved for survival and reproduction, but can create suffering when they persist beyond functional relationships. Understanding these biological systems transforms self-blame into strategic intervention, giving you agency in a process that often feels completely outside your control. First, oxytocin bonding circuits create persistent attachment that feels like physical need. Research from Sue Carter's oxytocin studies demonstrates that close relationships create oxytocin-based bonding circuits that function like addiction pathways. Your brain releases oxytocin during intimate moments, creating powerful neural associations between the person and feelings of safety, comfort, and belonging. These circuits don't simply turn off when relationships end, creating persistent longing that feels like physical craving. This neurological reality explains why letting go can feel as difficult as overcoming substance dependence, as your brain genuinely experiences the absence as withdrawal from a chemical it's learned to rely on for well-being. Second, attachment system activation creates anxious arousal that drives persistent reaching behavior. Phillip Shaver and Mario Mikulincer's attachment research shows that relationship loss activates the attachment system, creating physiological arousal designed to motivate reunion. This arousal includes increased heart rate, heightened vigilance for relationship cues, and anxious energy that drives you to seek contact. Your brain evolved this system to keep caregivers close for infant survival, but when activated in adult romantic relationships, it creates powerful urges to reconnect even when you consciously know the relationship isn't healthy or available. This system activation explains why you might find yourself checking their social media or fighting urges to reach out despite clear decisions to move on. Third, predictive coding makes your brain expect their presence constantly. Research from Karl Friston's predictive coding theory demonstrates that your brain builds models predicting your environment based on past experience. In relationships, your brain learns to expect their presence, responses, and influence as part of your world model. When they are suddenly absent, your brain's predictions are constantly violated, creating prediction errors that demand attention and explanation. This neurological mechanism makes their absence continually surprising, as your brain's model still includes their presence as the expected state, forcing constant updating attempts that keep them prominent in your awareness. Fourth, interoceptive conditioning creates bodily responses to relationship cues. Research from Bud Craig's interoception studies shows that relationships condition your body's internal responses to cues like their name, smell, or typical interactions. Your heart rate, breathing, and hormonal states become conditioned to respond to thoughts of them. When you attempt to let go, these conditioned physiological responses continue, creating internal discomfort that your brain interprets as missing them rather than recognizing as conditioned responses. This conditioning explains why thinking about letting go can trigger actual physical sensations of anxiety, loss, or emptiness, as your body has learned to respond physiologically to their presence or absence. Fifth, memory consolidation creates involuntary recall triggered by countless associated stimuli. Karim Nadir's memory research demonstrates that relationships create dense networks of associated memories connecting your ex to countless life contexts. Your brain stores these associations and recalls them involuntarily when encountering related stimuli. This involuntary recall keeps them present in your awareness, not through choice, but through brain functioning, similar to how smelling cookies might trigger childhood memories. The density of relationship associations means triggers are everywhere, constantly activating memories that feel like present longing, but are actually normal neural activation patterns. Sixth, there's actually a quiet, beautiful game built around this exact framework of understanding attachment mechanisms and systematically rewiring them. A 3D sanctuary called Inner Phoenix creates rooms for what you're observing about your brain's attachment patterns, what you're feeling, what you need for support, and what you might try next as you work with these powerful systems. It was designed for people who feel frustrated and overwhelmed by their brain's tenacity in holding on. But more on that in a moment. Let's continue exploring why your brain won't let go and what you can do about these powerful neurological systems. Seventh, identity fusion creates self-concept entanglement that makes letting go feel like self-loss. Research from Arthur Aaron's Self-Expansion. Theory shows that close relationships led to identity expansion where you incorporate aspects of your partner into your self-concept. When the relationship ends, your brain experiences letting go as losing pieces of yourself rather than losing an external person. This self-concept entanglement creates profound disorientation as you attempt to separate who you are from who you were together. Your brain resists this separation because it genuinely experiences the loss as self-loss rather than other loss, triggering survival-level resistance to change. Eighth, social identity integration makes them part of your community and status. Research from Henry Taffel's social identity theory demonstrates that relationships integrate partners into your social identity and community standing. Your brain stores them as part of your people, and losing them means losing social position, community connections, and shared identity markers. This social integration creates multi-layered loss beyond the individual, affecting your sense of belonging and social standing. Your brain resists letting go because it means reconstructing social identity, rebuilding community standing, and finding new ways to belong socially. Ninth, narrative reconstruction requires rewriting your life story without them as central character. Research from Dan McAdams' narrative identity research shows that people construct life stories with key characters playing central roles. When relationships end, your brain must reconstruct your entire life narrative, which is cognitively demanding and emotionally exhausting. This narrative work means rewriting past experiences, reinterpreting shared memories, and reimagining future storylines. Your brain resists this massive reconstruction effort, preferring to keep them in the story even if they're no longer present, making letting go cognitively overwhelming. 10th, unresolved grief layers create attachment beyond what's currently present. Research from Catherine Shear's Complicated Grief Studies demonstrates that losses often contain multiple grief layers beyond the immediate relationship, including loss of future plans, identity, social standing, and safety. Each layer creates separate attachment that must be processed. Your brain's inability to let go often reflects these multiple unresolved grief strands rather than simple missing of the person. Understanding these layers helps you address each separately, reducing the overwhelming feeling that you can't let go when actually you're experiencing multiple distinct losses requiring individual processing. 11th, if this explanation of why your brain won't let go has helped you understand what's happening neurologically, I'd appreciate if you'd give this video a thumbs up and subscribe with notifications so you don't miss future deep dives into attachment science. Your support helps these videos reach more people who feel frustrated and confused about why letting go feels impossible despite their best efforts. Your questions and experiences in the comments also help create a community of understanding around attachment processes, reducing shame and isolation that often accompany these struggles. 12th, predictive coding. Updating through new experiences allows brain to revise its world model gradually. Research from computational neuroscience shows that repeated new experiences without the person allow brain to update predictions. When you deliberately create new routines, new associations, and new experiences that don't include them, your brain gradually revises its world model to expect their absence. This model updating is gradual, requiring many prediction error corrections before the brain's expectations align with reality, explaining why letting go takes time and consistent new experiences rather than just deciding to move on. 13th, interoceptive reconditioning through new association training reduces conditioned responses. Research from behavioral neuroscience shows that pairing previously triggering internal states with new neutral or positive experiences reduces conditioned physiological responses. When you experience the internal sensations that previously meant missing them and instead pair them with new calming or rewarding activities, you recondition your body's responses. This retraining means that the same physical sensations gradually come to mean something different, reducing the emotional charge that kept you reaching toward them when these internal states arose throughout your daily life. 14th, dismantling identity fusion requires rebuilding self-concept through independent activities. Research from self-concept formation studies demonstrates that actively engaging in identity-defining activities separate from the relationship builds independent self-concept. When you deliberately choose activities, values, and goals that define you independently of who you were together, you create new self-concept neural pathways. This identity reconstruction reduces the brain's resistance to letting go because letting go no longer feels like losing yourself, improving your self-esteem, and shifting your center of gravity from relationship, embedded identity to autonomous self-definition through consistent independent practices. 15th, social identity reconstruction through new social connections and groups rebuilds community belonging. Research from social identity theory shows that forming new social connections and finding new social groups rebuilds social identity from Taffel's work. When you actively develop new friendships, join supportive communities, and find groups where you belong independently of the past relationship, you create new social identity markers. This social reconstruction means losing them no longer threatens your social standing or belonging, as your brain builds new networks of your people who reference your current identity rather than past relationship status, enabling healthier future relationships. 16th, narrative reconstruction. Through storytelling and meaning making, creates coherent post-relationship. Identity research from narrative therapy shows that telling your story in ways that honor the past while emphasizing current growth and future possibility creates coherent new narrative. When you intentionally craft your life story with themes of learning, resilience, and new direction, you give your brain a new story structure that doesn't require them as central character. This storytelling isn't about erasing the past, but creating a new narrative arc where they were a chapter, not the whole book, making letting go part of your heroic journey rather than tragic loss. 17th, grief layer processing through identification and addressing each separate loss accelerates overall letting go. Research from grief work shows that identifying and processing each loss layer separately reduces overwhelming feelings that prevent progress. When you name and mourn the loss of future plans, process the identity changes, grieve the social shifts, and acknowledge the safety loss as distinct experiences, you prevent the overwhelming feeling that you can't let go because it's too much. This systematic approach honors that your brain is actually working through multiple legitimate losses, each deserving of its own processing timeline and attention. 18th, and hey, before you go, there's a 3D game called Inner Phoenix. You walk through it like a quiet temple with rooms for what you're observing about your brain's attachment patterns, what you're feeling, what you need for support, and what you might try next for your letting go journey. It was made for exactly these moments when why my brain won't let go of them feels confusing and overwhelming. No pressure. It's in the description below whenever you're ready. 19th, practicing self-compassion. For letting go difficulties, treats yourself with kindness. Research from Krista and Neff's self-compassion work demonstrates that treating yourself kindly for struggling to let go reduces shame that blocks progress. When you recognize that letting go is neurologically difficult due to powerful attachment systems, treat yourself with kindness rather than criticism, and recognize that many people experience these same struggles, you create safety needed for change. This compassionate stance reduces the stress response that actually strengthens attachment circuits, paradoxically making letting go easier by removing the self-attack that activates threat systems and reinforces attachment bonds. 20th, celebrating small moments of letting go builds momentum and confidence. Research from behavior modification shows that reinforcing small successes increases overall success significantly. When you notice moments when thoughts are less intrusive, when urges to reach out are resisted, or when identity feels more independent, celebrating these moments reinforces neural pathways for letting go. This positive reinforcement accelerates brain rewiring by making new patterns more rewarding, creating positive feedback that strengthens letting go circuits and builds confidence that change is possible, even when it feels impossibly slow. 21st, trusting your brain's natural capacity to update and adapt sustains long-term progress. Research from Michael Merzenig's Neuroplasticity work demonstrates that trusting your brain's ability to change sustains motivation and patience. When you believe that consistent practice gradually rewires attachment circuits, you persist through slow periods and setbacks. This trust prevents discouragement and abandonment during difficult periods, recognizing that brain rewiring is occurring even when not immediately visible. Your brain evolved powerful learning and adaptation systems, and trusting these systems supports long-term engagement with letting go practices. 22nd, your persistence in learning about these mechanisms demonstrates your brain's natural capacity for growth and change. This commitment to understanding shows your capacity for self-awareness and intentional change. Learning about attachment neuroscience isn't just gathering information, but actively engaging your brain's learning systems in service of healing. This knowledge-based approach honors that you are capable of understanding complex neurological processes and applying them to your own experience, demonstrating the very neural flexibility needed to let go by, showing you can learn new patterns and apply new frameworks. 23rd, accepting that letting go is gradual. Respects your brain's learning timeline research from behavior. Change studies shows that lasting neural change requires weeks to months of consistent practice. Accepting that letting go takes time prevents the unrealistic expectation of immediate results that leads to abandoning effective practices. This acceptance honors your brain's natural learning rhythm rather than demanding it match your emotional timeline. Patience with the process paradoxically accelerates progress by reducing the stress that blocks neural rewiring, creating the calm conditions necessary for brain systems to update and adapt to new reality. 24th, maintaining focus on your needs rather than their reactions prevents re-engagement that would maintain attachment research from self-determination. Theory demonstrates that focusing on autonomous goals reduces attachment system activation. When you prioritize your own growth, values, and needs independently of what they might think or feel, you reduce the attention and mental energy given to them. This focus shift redirects mental resources towards self-construction rather than other monitoring, naturally weakening attachment circuits as your brain finds new rewarding targets. This autonomous focus creates sustainable letting go by building independent life rather than continuously referencing their absence. 25th, acknowledging progress even when incomplete motivates continued practice. Research from motivation studies shows that recognizing partial progress increases persistence significantly. When you notice that thoughts are less frequent even if still present, that urges are less intense even if they still arise, or that identity feels more independent even if fused areas remain, acknowledging this progress provides motivation. This recognition prevents all or nothing thinking that abandons practices when perfect letting go hasn't occurred, supporting continued effort that eventually leads to complete attachment release. 26th, understanding that some attachments may never fully disappear, but can become manageable creates realistic expectations. Research from attachment and neuroscience shows that deep attachment leaves permanent neural traces, but these traces can become quiet background rather than active drivers. Some particularly meaningful relationships may always create occasional thoughts or feelings even years later. The goal isn't necessarily complete absence, but reduced emotional impact and voluntary control. Understanding this realistic outcome prevents discouragement when years-old attachment creates occasional activation. Recognizing that occasional thoughts don't indicate failure, but allowing them to pass without re-engagement demonstrates mature attachment management. 27th, your brain's letting go capacity reflects its healthy attachment systems. Your brain is not malfunctioning. Research from Sue Carter's attachment neuroscience demonstrates that persistent attachment reflects well-functioning bonding systems, not pathology. The same oxytocin circuits that currently cause suffering are essential for forming deep human connections and would be problematic if they disappeared. Understanding that your brain tenacity reflects healthy attachment capacity rather than weakness reduces shame and reframes letting go as working with rather than fighting against your brain's relational strengths, honoring your capacity for deep connection while redirecting it toward new relationships and contexts. 28th, integrating letting go as growth rather than loss transforms brain's response. Research from post-traumatic growth studies demonstrates that framing endings as opportunities for development changes neural processing of loss. When you frame letting go not as losing someone, but as gaining self-knowledge, autonomy, and capacity for healthier future relationships, your brain processes the experience through growth networks rather than grief networks. This reframing activates reward and learning circuits rather than threat and loss circuits, accelerating letting go by making it neurologically rewarding rather than simply painful. This integration transforms endings into developmental milestones. 29th, your commitment to understanding and working with your brain's mechanisms honors your own well-being. This commitment to learning about attachment, neuroscience, and applying strategies demonstrates care for yourself. If this video has been helpful and you want to support more content about attachment science and letting go strategies, please give it a thumbs up and subscribe with notifications on. Your engagement helps these evidence-based approaches reach more people who feel stuck and ashamed about why letting go feels impossible. Your questions and experiences in the comments create community support that reduces isolation and increases access to healing for everyone navigating letting go. 30th, your capacity for deep attachment is a gift that will serve you in future relationships, despite current pain. Research from attachment theory and positive psychology shows that attachment capacity remains valuable across your lifespan. Your brain's ability to form deep bonds that persist despite separation is evidence of your relational capacity, not a flaw to eliminate. Once you successfully redirect these powerful attachment circuits toward new relationships and appropriate targets, this same tenacity that currently causes pain becomes the foundation for deep, lasting connection. Your brain is not broken. It's learning and adapting, and its attachment strength will become one of your greatest relational assets.